I want to invite you into a space of deep reflection today. I often think of the human mind as an architecture. It's this incredibly complex, intricate structure that gets meticulously built during our most formative years, really those first 12 years of life. So today, we're going to examine the very foundation of that structure. We're going to explore the architecture of abandonment and really look at how a developing mind processes the profound weight of toxic parenting. Think about this for a second. What if the most dangerous person in your life was actually the one supposed to protect you? Let that reality sink in. We're not talking about a stranger or a known enemy. We're talking about someone whose voice you literally learned to recognize before you even understood language. For millions of people, the devastating reality is exactly that. A parent, the absolute symbol of safety, was the primary architect of their trauma. To really grasp the scale of this, we've got to look at the numbers. In just a single year, the U.S. recorded 50,000 confirmed cases of child emotional abuse. 50,000. But here's the truth. The real number is astronomically higher than that. Those 50,000, they're just the cases with a paper trail and witnesses. Emotional abuse operates entirely in the shadows because it doesn't leave physical bruises to photograph. Instead, it leaves profound, invisible neural damage that completely alters the trajectory of a human life. Let's dive right into the neuroscience, because this is where that unseen damage actually occurs. There is a fundamental biological difference between how a child and an adult process information. See, children operate almost entirely from their limbic system. That's their emotional core. Their prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for rational logic and the ability to just say, wait, that's not true, well, that doesn't fully develop until their mid-20s. Because of this biological reality, a child simply cannot contextualize toxic words. They don't evaluate them, they absorb them as an absolute, unquestionable identity. And this vulnerability brings us to the very first of 8 psychological weapons toxic parents wield: the attack on the body. We're talking about words like, you're too fat, or you look ridiculous. It is absolutely critical to understand that this is not just a parent being blunt. No, this is targeted psychological damage. To a developing mind, they can't separate what their body looks like from who they inherently are as a person. So an attack on their appearance, that's an attack on their entire sense of self. The long-term clinical outcome of this first weapon is just devastating. You see, a parent is supposed to be the mirror that reflects a child's worth back to them. But toxic parents, they hand their children a cracked mirror instead. And the tragedy here is that the child will often spend decades, sometimes their entire adult life, trying to fix a reflection that was fundamentally broken by someone else. This, right here, is exactly where conditions like body dysmorphia and severe eating disorders find their earliest roots. This physiological absorption sets the stage for the second weapon: shame disguised as a question. Why do you walk like that? Or why are you so weird? Sarcasm and rhetorical questioning are wielded as incredibly sophisticated tools for abuse, mainly because they hide behind plausible deniability. The parent can just casually say, hey, I was just asking. But remember the neuroscience. The child's limbic system doesn't register sarcasm at all. It registers the observation as a literal, factual indictment of their behavior. This constant questioning of a child's nature leads directly to chronic social anxiety. We really need to shift the blame away from the victim's perceived brokenness and recognize this for what it is: an actual clinical pathology. This intense fear of being perceived, this exhausting, constant monitoring of every single gesture and word, it's not a character flaw. It is a highly effective, learned survival response to an environment where their very existence was constantly framed as wrong. Now we arrive at the third weapon. Just listen to these words for a second. I wish you were never born. There are honestly few sentences in the human language more devastating than that. When a parent delivers this kind of existential erasure, the child doesn't react with healthy anger. They react with something far, far more dangerous: subconscious agreement. The child's brain literally begins to wire itself physically around the core belief that they are an inconvenience to the world. In clinical psychology, we call this existential shame. So the crucial takeaway here is that this isn't guilt over a specific action, like breaking a vase or failing a math test. It is shame about merely existing. These words, which are so often spoken by a parent in a reckless, fleeting moment of rage, they build a permanent, deeply embedded belief that the child is a burden. And that is a direct predecessor to severe chronic depression and self-harm. The fourth weapon builds right on top of this feeling of being a burden by subtly making the child feel like a tangible cost.
"You're exhausting. Taking care of you drains me." This is such an insidious tactic because it teaches a developing child to compress themselves. They learn to feel an overwhelming, crushing sense of guilt for possessing basic biological human needs, whether that's feeling hungry, needing comfort when they're scared, or just needing care when they're sick. The nervous system's response to this compression is what we call hypervigilant attachment. The child becomes obsessively, painfully aware of the literal space they take up. And this nervous system adaptation carries directly into adulthood. It creates the adult who apologizes constantly, the person who shrinks down in a room, and someone who literally cannot ask for help even when they are drowning. Because to their adult brain, expressing a need is still subconsciously viewed as highly, highly dangerous. Next up, we encounter the comparison trap. Why can't you be more like your brother? The parent might genuinely think they're just motivating the child, but what they're actually doing is teaching the child that love is a conditional, cutthroat competition. They are clearly signaling you are less than and you are entirely replaceable. And the inevitable fallout of that dynamic is pathological people-pleasing. This intense, burning need to appease everyone around you stems right from that early belief that you are in constant competition for basic affection. What's absolutely vital to recognize here is that the psychological origin of sibling rivalry was never truly about the child's performance. It always functioned as a mechanism of parental control. Next is the sixth weapon, the absolute verdict. You're useless. Now, these are not critiques of behavior. They are catastrophic verdicts. And remember, the developing mind of a child has no appeals court to challenge them. The permanence of these absolute statements is exactly what makes them so profoundly destructive. The child's limbic system registers, "You will never amount to anything," not as an angry exaggeration, but as a biological certainty. This absolute verdict actually aligns perfectly with Dr. Carol Dweck's renowned research on mindset. Just notice the difference between a behavioral critique, like "you made a mistake," and an identity verdict, "you are a mistake." This explains exactly why a traumatized child just stops trying. It isn't out of laziness, no way. It's because their brain has fully accepted a fixed, unchangeable narrative about their own potential. I mean, why try if your very identity is failure? This seventh weapon strikes at the most primal part of human biology, the threat of abandonment. A leave, you'll wake up alone. To a child's nervous system, a parent is a biological anchor. They are the literal signal for survival. Threatening to remove that anchor doesn't just make a child sad, it triggers an emergency primal terror. The child's nervous system slams into an acute survival mode, and unfortunately, it usually gets stuck right there. This creates what attachment theory calls fearful-avoidant attachment. This is the adult who has this desperate, aching desire for intimacy, but it's paired with an unconscious terror of it. They will often push people away just to protect themselves from being left first. And the crazy part? Even if the parent's threat of abandonment was never actually carried out, the paralyzing fear of it was permanently installed into that child's nervous system. And finally, we have the eighth weapon, the empty promise. Behave and I'll get you that thing you want, followed by total silence. On the surface, to an outside observer, this might seem like the mildest offense on our list, but it's actually a systematic, devastating dismantling of a child's capacity for trust. Every broken promise is a powerful lesson that words mean absolutely nothing and that hope only ever leads to pain. The clinical result of this is relational learned helplessness. The brain deeply, structurally maps the concept of a promise directly to disappointment. This specific relational trauma is the exact origin of the adult who constantly waits for the other shoe to drop in every single interpersonal relationship. Their brain has literally been trained to be incapable of trusting others, even when that trust is completely 100% warranted. So the crucial point we really must take away as we transition to our closing thoughts is this. These emotional memories do not simply fade with time like old phone numbers. No, these toxic words operate invisibly in adulthood. They embed in the nervous system as automatic reflexes, completely dictating our choices and relationships. Acknowledging this generational trauma is paramount. It is a pathology to be treated with deep compassion, and it is absolutely not a reason for self-blame. But here is the truly incredible news. The brain is plastic. Childhood words are not permanent ink. To actually heal, we need to follow a few clinical steps. First, fiercely acknowledge the original story that was forced upon you. Second, sit with the recognition of how it affected you without running from it. And third, utilize neuroplasticity to rewrite the code.
You can actually physically rewire these neural pathways through therapy, self-compassion, and conscious, deliberate effort. I want to leave you with this final, powerful thought today. The words written in your childhood built a prison. But who holds the power to rewrite your story today? You are no longer the helpless victim of a toxic architect. You have the power right now to be the empowered architect of your own recovery. Your brain's neuroplasticity is just waiting for your instructions. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. I really encourage you to take these insights, reflect on your own story, and begin the profound, beautiful work of rewriting it.